10 items that you should have in your survival kit for emergencies. This is Urban Sentinel, and let's get into it. Now, by no means is this a definitive list and end-all be-all for items in survival kits. These are 10 common items that I have in several of my kits, and these are also some of the more common things that most people tend to put into survival kits. And I'm going to be framing it more from the perspective of being in a city, in an urban environment, versus being out in the countryside, out in the rural areas. Now, first up, water filtration. Water by any means is the most critical thing that you could have in a survival situation. Now, this is a 5-gallon water filter. You don't necessarily have to have something this large, but having some type of water filtration system or water purification pills, so that way at the minimum, if you've got a couple of containers, canteens, jugs, what have you, or even reusing empty water bottles themselves to be able to purify drinking water, so that way you stay healthy and you stay alive. Another item, lighting, illumination. It could be a handheld flashlight. You could get a headlamp. You might have a solar powered light that you can use to illuminate a room. Candles are also effective as well, but they kind of fall into a separate category because there may be times where the last thing you want is an open flame burning, especially in an enclosed area or when you're trying to actually be mobile and move. So you want to have at least 1 or 2 good working flashlights with batteries that you know that when you need to, they'll work for you. Another item is overlooked, a simple, preferably battery operated, but if possible, hand cranked or even solar operated radio, AM, FM, that sort of thing. Now, granted, not every scenario, not every situation is going to be a lack of communication or a complete blackout of communications across the board. There just simply may be a case where your cell phone and the information you may get from it isn't working because the cell phone towers are down. But radio transmissions travel a lot farther, and in emergency situations, government agencies such as FEMA have a greater capability of broadcasting information through a traditional radio wave frequency than they would through Wi-Fi and everything else in the internet, because if towers go down in a certain area, those cell phones, those laptops and tablets, they're not going to receive that information. Now, another thing that goes along with communications where that was on the reception end is being able to broadcast. Now, you may think handheld radios, definitely good. And in an emergency situation, even if you only have a radio, there's a good chance that someone's monitoring the frequencies to listen for communications from people looking for help. But another thing that you could look at is a whistle. You want to think more locally. You're trapped inside a building and you can hear or even see perhaps rescuers searching through rubble if there was an earthquake, a massive fire, some type of explosion, whatever the case may be. But you yourself may not be able to visually signal to them. You might be in a position where you can see out, but it's a lot harder for them to see in towards where you are. If you have some type of whistle, you can make yourself heard, draw their attention to the direction of where the sound comes from, which may speed up the process of them at least knowing that you're there. Now, these two items kind of go together, especially in an urban environment. You immediately don't think about it because most people that live in cities know the streets that run east to west, north to south. They recognize the landmarks of certain buildings or statues. And even if they don't know every single road, boulevard, and avenue in their town, they have a good idea of where they're at in relation to their home, school, work, etc. But in a crisis situation, it may be dark. It may be a case of there's a massive fire, so it's harder to see. There could be an earthquake where you have buildings literally collapse across roadways and across other buildings. You yourself might be trapped inside a structure where you can't see outside to even get your bearings, and everything is kind of topsy-turvy, turned upside down. Binoculars, number one. Now, granted, binoculars work more effectively at farther away distances, but in some cases, you may simply need to use the binoculars to visually confirm that the street that you think is 2 blocks up is the actual street, because the buildings that you use as reference are either obscured or possibly collapsed. Another thing that's also good, especially interior, compass. Sometimes literally knowing which way you're facing can help your brain and your memory orientate yourself to the rest of the world around you when you are missing those natural subconscious landmarks that you pass by every single day and you don't pay attention to until the one time that you go to look for it and it's not there. Now, again, first aid, always important. Bandages, gauze, band-aids, antiseptic, tourniquet, you name it, whatever you can, if possible, have at least one good, still portable first aid kit that whether you keep this in a backpack, you keep it in your desk drawer, something to that effect, wherever you feel you're going to be and wherever you might need it the most, you want to be able to have it on hand. It may not be for you. It could be for someone else. You could come across a total stranger and you're trying to help. And if you have that, at least that's something. But always making sure that you have first aid kit on hand and you know how to use everything that's in there. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be an EMT. But if you at least have some basic understanding of the first aid principles, that will help you out greatly. Now, I will say tools as a broad range coverage. And I would suggest that if you don't have a decent set of hand tools, buy one of those small combination general toolkits that gives you, the screwdriver set, the wrenches, the socket, the hammer, and a few other tools just so you have something. On the other aspect, even carrying something like a multi-tool can help you out in a pinch. Now, is this going to fix everything? Absolutely not. But sometimes you just need a few things, a little bit of an extra edge that you can't quite do by yourself with your bare hands. And having a multi-tool gives you that option. You can sort of figure out the capacity and the capability of this versus the problem that you're presented with. And also in connection with water, a 4-way Silcock key, primarily for opening and unlocking those spigot valves that you may notice on the sides of buildings, because in certain situations, if water is unavailable, it may still be in the pipes, still in the system, just not readily flowing. But if you can unlock those spigots, you can gain access to the water that is in there. And as a general rule, as an example, it's not always, if, say, for example, you're in a 4-story building and you make sure that all of the faucets are all turned off on the lower 3 floors and the other apartments on the 4th floor, and then you open up your actual valve, the pressure difference from when you open up your valve will allow all the water that's in the pipes coming up from the main line to move up unobstructed into your actual faucet, because there are no air gaps coming from the other faucets. Now, again, that's something that you would have to go around and check to make sure that a shower's not on or that a sink isn't running, things like that. But in a situation where power's gone out and the actual water pumps that move the water throughout the city aren't functioning, that's one way to get water up to where you're at in a short-term basis. It won't last forever. You're not going to be taking hot showers or anything like that, but you will be able to get water up to you temporarily until that pressure equalizes out, and then it stops. And if there's no more water in the line, nothing else is coming through. Another item, always good to have, fire. Whether it be a lighter, you have ferro rods, matches, whatever it is. Sometimes you may need to start a fire to possibly sterilize equipment for some type of medical procedure. Hopefully it won't come to that. Other times you may simply need to start a fire to keep warm or to cook food or to make signaling, whatever the case may be. Having something that you can pretty much be sure will work, even something as simple as just a regular everyday disposable lighter, can help you out, again, in those situations that may pop up in that disaster, in that crisis where you need it. Another item, I'll just say rope in general, but bungee cords to help tie things down, bundle things up if you've got to bring equipment or supplies from one place to another. You've got paracord like this. It's small, it's light. You can roll up literally dozens of feet and it'll fit inside your pocket, no problem, but also larger rope. Now, for people that live in higher up buildings, you may want to consider having sufficient rope and also sufficient skill that if, say, you had to get down from a higher level through a stairwell that might be partially blocked where you can't simply take the stairs all the way down, being able to fashion the proper knots, tie off the rope, and basically lower yourself down the next flight or the next 2 flights to speed up your evacuation is something that you also need to consider, because if there is a major disaster, yes, first responders will be out where they can get out. They will be at the locations that they can get to. If your building is the only building affected, they'll be there. But if your block and the next 6 blocks around them are also affected, it may be a while, and you may be better off, in some cases, staying put. But in other cases, when your gut is telling you that creaking sound and that floor slowly moving to one direction and the other building's getting closer, it tells you you need to leave where you're at, then you need to leave where you're at. Another item, waterproof case. Now, the case by itself is not really necessary. You could do with a plastic bag, even tape it up with some duct tape to give it a little more durability. But having a small waterproof case, primarily, first and foremost, keeps some cash in hand. Now, in a grid down scenario, in a massive power outage, it's hit or miss as to what businesses will be doing business, will be accepting cash, will be taking money, will be giving change, whatever it is. So you want to make sure that if you're carrying cash, small bills, singles, 5s, 10s. You don't want to pull out 50s and 100s, things like that, because again, in certain scenarios, somebody sees you and they see that, oh, you've got $100, $200, $300 right there. They're going to be after you real quick. They may not even wait for you to finish your transaction. They just may come after you then and there. Now, again, not every scenario shuts the grid down. Not every scenario will involve an EMP that wipes out the computer system. Another thing you might want to think about, gift cards. You pay for them in advance. They have a certain value on them. If you know of area stores around you that utilize gift cards, and you can even get these general gift cards from credit card companies, that may be a way for you to basically conduct transactions without flashing cash. Keeps you a little bit safer. You can even designate certain cards for certain things. So if you feel that the gas stations may still be up and running, you might have a gift card that you've written on it with marker gas, and that'll give you X amount of money for gas. You make another one that might be a more expensive gift card, putting on it for motels, so you can pay for a motel with that. Whatever the case may be. Yes, sure, cash is definitely king, but if you don't need to, if you can use something else like this in lieu of it, that may also save you some headache and takes up less space. Now, one of the last things in this list, and I actually got this from a buddy of mine, he just came back from vacation, a deck of playing cards. And not for the reason of to pass the boredom, to keep you occupied, that sort of thing. It's small, it's light, you even don't need all of them. What you would actually use, and again, this is in a more urban environment, but it could also be used out in the woods, out in the natural environment. Use the cards to mark your path, to mark the places that you've been. So if you are literally navigating through the streets after a major earthquake and everything is dust covered, buildings are falling down all over the place, and you just simply can't walk down the sidewalk a couple of blocks to get to your next destination, you may have to pass through an office building or pass through a section of a mall. It's dark or dimly lit. You get turned around because, again, you can't tell which way you're actually facing because streets are irrelevant at that point. Using a card to place on something, even in the woods, fold it, put it on a branch, lets you know that at least you were in this area, so you're not circling back around. Even in the wintertime, people get lost in the woods because they're down there, it's snowing, the light's getting dimmer, they don't realize that they've circled back around because their tracks are covered up or they're 30, 40 feet just off their original path, so they don't even see that. Playing cards can help you out, and it also gives search and rescue people an idea that someone's there, because yeah, a playing card just laying on the ground could have blown there easily. But when it's folded and tucked into a doorway, or whether it's placed in a position that clearly it didn't accidentally get there, that can lead them to say, hey, we noticed a card 60 feet back at that entryway. We found another one over here on this hallway. We can see another one down there at the stairwell. Somebody must have put it there. Let's go check it out. And if you happen to work out a little like communications with some people, you might use something, say the ace, to point in the actual direction that you were going to let them know that, hey, I'm going this way. If you've got a situation where you need to be able to find your way back, same thing. You put the cards down either face up or face down, so as you pass them coming back, flip them the other way, so this way you know that, oh, when I went up this way, I didn't find what I was looking for, so now I'm going back around to this side and I'll check it out. But again, these are small things that you need to think about, and there are plenty of other items that I could have gone over that I didn't, because otherwise it would be a top 100, and neither myself nor you have time for all that. So I narrowed it down to some of the most common things that you'll find and some of the things that you should have in your emergency preparedness kit for those inevitable situations that do happen. Now, granted, if you've got it all in one and you're ready to go and you have that bag, that kit with you, good on you. If you've got multiple vehicles, multiple places that you effectively are at, whether it's home, your work, school, neighbor's house, whatever it is, you may want to consider some way of parsing it out or buying extras, doubles, triples, whatever it is of certain items, so you have smaller kits or even the same kits lined up ready to go. It really comes down to what you're looking to do and how you're looking to get there. Oh, one more. This is absolutely unnecessary and it's not an endorsement. I just love this thing to death and I've been using it for different projects around the house. But again, in a disaster situation where I have to get out or get into things, I'm using my Stanley Fat Max food bar. I can pry, I can bash, I can rip, I can rake, whatever it is I need to do, I can get it done with this. Now, is this an everyday carry item? No. Is this that once in a lifetime, oh boy, I've been waiting for it type of item? Absolutely. And it's not to say that you need this or you need anything else. You could get a crowbar and do just as well prying open doors, smashing windows, leveraging anything that you need. You just have to think about the environment that you're in and the situations that could evolve around you under certain circumstances. And it's not to say everything that you do will work out well, because that's the reality. That never happens. But if you're prepared and you plan out a little bit here and a little bit there and you keep these things in your mind, it'll make it a lot easier when those situations do actually happen. And that's all I got for you today. I'll catch you in the next one.